Hello, my dear learners. Welcome back to CIBA Learning Zone. Today, we are going to talk about the use of land in a community. That is the topic we are studying at the moment. Don't forget, we talked about the type of settlements last week. But today, our focus is going to be on SLUM and natural disaster. So by the end of the lesson, you should be able to explain the meaning of SLUM and natural disaster, and then state 4 causes of flooding. That is our objective for the lesson for today. What is a slum? A slum is an overcrowded settlement where the buildings are not arranged in any order due to improper planning. A slum can also be defined as area of a city where living conditions are very bad, where the houses are in bad conditions. So we have a picture of a slum here. This is a slum in Accra, popularly known as Sodom and Gomorrah or Agbogboshi. That is a slum over there. We also have another picture here showing us another slum. Don't forget, we said a slum is a settlement whereby the buildings are not arranged in any order. And if you take a look at the pictures we have here, you see that all the buildings are not properly arranged as compared to other settlements which has been properly arranged. So this is a slum in Cape Coast. Let's take a look at what natural disaster is. A natural disaster can be described as any misfortune that occurs from natural phenomena. Example, we have floods, earthquake, outbreak of diseases, etc. It can also be defined as a natural event such as flood, earthquake, or hurricane that causes great damage or loss of life. Examples of natural disaster. We mentioned earthquake as an example of natural disaster, and this is a picture of an earthquake which occurred in Japan, Fukushima, in 2005. It claimed about 3,000 lives. You see, earthquake happens as a result of a sudden violent shaking of the ground, causing great destruction as a result of movement within the earth's surface or within the earth crust or volcanic reaction. That is what happened in Fukushima 2005, and in fact a lot of people died. So one example of a natural disaster is earthquake. And then we have another example here called landslide. A landslide. And this happens as a result of movement of a rock or earth down a slope section of land. Now if you take a look at the picture we have here, you see that the section of the land is slope. It's a slope. And then you see the section of the land has moved just like that. And when it happens, it causes a great destruction. This happened in Sri Lanka. It's another example of a natural disaster. And then we have hurricane. This happened in Florida. And hurricane is a strong or a violent storm of wind. It blows. Look, if you take a look at the picture, you could see that, all the houses have been destroyed by the hurricane. When it happens, in fact, it causes a great destruction. If you take a look at the picture, you see that, look at the condition of this house in particular. See that it's not easy. So a hurricane is also an example of a natural disaster. And then we have flooding or flood. So flooding happens to be an example of a natural disaster. This is an example of flood which happens in Accra. It happened in Accra, and this happened in Czech Republic. And flooding usually happens as a result of continuous or excess rainfall which causes rivers to overflow. their banks. And then we have tornado as another example. A tornado as another example of a natural disaster. And this happens as a violent rotating column of air extending from thunderstorm to the ground. If you take a look at a picture, you see the column of air rotating from a thunderstorm to the ground. This kind of natural disaster don't happen in Africa. It happened in the European countries and then Asia. That is where these natural disasters mostly happen. But Africa, we don't experience such examples of natural disaster. So a tornado is also an example of a natural disaster. And then we have another example called the volcanic eruption. Volcanic eruption. Volcanic eruption. See? Volcanic eruption. And then we also have another example. This actual example happened in Ghana. The collapse of the Melcom building in Accra, that is November 2012. It was a tragedy for the whole country. When it happened, the building just collapsed and people were inside and people died. If you take a look at this picture, you could see that there is a man there. Look at his leg. He's stuck inside the building and people are trying to, help him and bring him out before he died. Before he dies. And another example of a natural disaster that happened in Ghana, the June 3rd natural disaster. The June 3rd natural disaster that happened in Ghana 2015. 154 people died and 100 suffered severe burns. In fact, this was another tragic incident which happened in Ghana in 2015. It was a natural disaster. Now let's take a look at what flooding is. Flooding occurs when continuous rainfall causes drains, streams, and rivers to overflow their banks and spill excess water to farms, wetlands, and households. We talked about the examples. We shown this picture. So this is an example of a flooding. When it happens, the rivers overflow their banks. If you take a look at the picture, you see that all the vehicles are being swallowed by rivers, and buildings are also being swallowed. Let's take a look at the causes of flooding. But before we continue, let's take a quick exercise. After that, we continue with the causes of flooding.